All right, part two of this video, we're moving from up on the mat now onto our feet. So a lot of cradles, when you think about people hitting cradles, I think more often than not, majority of it is going to happen when you're on the mat in top position. But there's a lot of opportunities to get cradles on our feet too, in neutral, from the offensive perspective and also defensively. And we're going to start off with the offensive side of it. So start down here. We're going to go over a near side cradle from the front headlock position. And actually, I was wrong. We'll go on this side. So front headlock, very common position in wrestling. Basically, I have Tony's head stuck underneath me. Just a couple key points on front headlock. I have a 4-hour video on front headlock offense. If you want to look at that, we'll go over it a little bit more there. But just positioning wise, I don't want my elbow way out here where he can get his head up. He could even like duck under me here potentially. I want to keep his head trapped underneath my chest. The whole point is to keep his head and neck kind of bent, keeping pressure on his low back or stress on his low back, and keeping his head trapped. Just it's not as much fun for him to be there, so I'm keeping it nice and tight here, keeping his head blocked in. A lot of times I'm kind of like this, keeping his head trapped in this pocket underneath my chest here, but my other hand is not on his head. It's in the back of his armpit here. Now, for this first cradle, as I mentioned before, I'm usually going to take what he's giving me, and that's going to apply to which leg I'm attacking from the cradle, as it's going to be the near side leg, or if I'm going to attack the far leg. We're going to start on this near leg, and like I said, we're going to do a near side cradle. Sometimes both legs are too far away. You can be a little bit, push back a little bit further. Yeah, if your hands are posted, you get your legs further back. Yeah, sometimes I can't really get to either, so we have to kind of adjust, and there's some things I'll show, but let's assume that Tony's hands aren't on the mat. One of these legs should be within reach. And again, I have short arms. One of these legs should be within reach of my arm. So we're going to start on this side. And from here on this near side cradle, slide in a little bit. I think we're running to the wall. So I'm going to tuck my head. Let's just bring that leg back for a second. So let's say I'm really committed to going to this cradle. Like I said before, I'm going to take what he's giving me, but I do want to show you a setup for this. So slide back a tiny bit. Let's say this leg's back. Back. One thing I can do is just a simple circle and pull. That should bring this leg to me. Again, if the other leg's forward, I'm going to attack the other leg, but to set it up, all we have to do is circle and pull. This leg comes to me. As soon as I can reach that leg, I'm bringing my head in, and I'm going to try to block his arm with my head so he can't get this arm back. Here, my arm comes in, and I'm just locking my cradle on our feet. Same way we were doing on the mat. 10-finger grip. Trying to lock as close to his head as I can here. And then from here, I'm just driving in, but I'm pulling down on his head, and I'll switch the angle in a second. Pulling down on his head, and I'm driving in. So we want his head and his knees to come down to the mat, and then we're just going to drive him over. Same as the near side cradle that we had when we were on the mat. So here, lock my hands, my head's in his side, pull it down, and then from here, I can pop my head back out, turn it a tiny bit. Oops, sorry, using head. Adjust, and then if you remember, if I'm too high here, I can sprawl my hips back, readjust, and come up. Also, we can hook this ankle and put pressure on his face. I don't want to smash Tony's face here. I already did that once, so I think you guys get the point on the finish. Looking more at the setups here and different ways we can get the cradle. So on this opposite side, Tony already has the leg forward for me, make it nice and easy, so I don't need to make him step. I'm pulling on the arm that is on the same side that I'm attacking, because I don't want him to get this arm out and kind of be able to defend almost like a down block here, or if he gets under my arm here, he probably wouldn't want to do that, but in general, I need this arm out of the way. He can use this to block, he can try to control my wrist, different things he can do. So I want to extend this and create a bigger window here so I can put my head kind of in that little gap there, putting my ear in his armpit. This makes it easier for me to get my hands under, block, and then pulling him down towards the mat, pop my head back out, adjust. I can pin him that way, or as I mentioned, we can hook his leg, and I'm not going to smash his face right now, so I'll just roll off to the side, but in general, I can keep my ribs right in his nose and mouth there to make it hard for him to breathe, make it very uncomfortable there. So maybe one time straight on, here, coming through this leg, I'm bringing myself off to the side. I'm not standing straight in front and trying to lock like this. That's going to be really hard to do, even if I had long arms. Say I did bring it forward a little bit. Even if I did get my hands locked, remember I said I want my lock near his head. If I'm doing this, my lock's near his knee, all he's going to do is pull his leg back. I'm not going to be able to hold on to that. So I need to adjust, step my body out to the side, Now now my lock's up near his head, pull him down. Now we can adjust and get our pin here. So that's just our first method off of our feet. Just a near side cradle off our front headlock, making sure that we're stepping out to the side, extending his arm, keeping his head trapped underneath us, and then reaching up, getting that lock nice and close to his neck as possible. Okay, continuing with the front headlock and our cradle opportunities from here. I mentioned in the previous clip that we can take either his near side leg or his far leg. For me, I actually prefer attacking the far leg. I think it's a little easier to set up. I think sometimes attacking the near leg against an opponent who's not completely worn out, not super tired, it's hard to just attack. It's hard. This seems too telegraphed a lot of the times, and the guys can kind of tell as soon as I come to here, that leg goes back. That's common, kind of more common of what happens. Occasionally you'll get it if you really set it up well. But a savvy wrestler is going to know, like, all right, I see what you're doing here, and that's not usually going to work. So what does work a little bit better is attacking this far leg with a low leg cradle here. And again, this one does work really well if a guy's tired, but we can also set it up if the guy's not so tired. And you can do that a couple different ways. One could be to actually just go for the other cradle, like you just saw Tony committed to stepping backwards. Another way I like to do it, and I set up a few different attacks this way, is just reaching for his leg, like I'm trying to attack it almost like a single leg, when I'm really not trying to do anything, but I just want to see what he's going to do and how he's going to react. So I guess we do want to stay on this side, sorry. So I have my front headlock, and basically all I do is just grab here. That's all I want him to do. And a lot of people won't go ahead and bring it back. A lot of guys, if I grab this leg, they're not going to just sit here. Like, they will pull it back. So when he pulls that leg back, now I have the opening that I want. So when I'm here, I have my front headlock. I'm going to be extending this arm out, and I'm going to try to put my right ear basically on his right pec. I'm going to be trying to look at his far knee. Now we can switch the directions. So I create this opening on this side. My head's going to go through, and I should be looking almost at the camera. My left hand is going to shoot across behind his knee here. As that happens, I'm not going to pull his leg towards me. I'm actually going to drive through at an angle to drive him down to his hip. As that happens, I'll be able to lock up my cradle. So I have his head here. Pull your leg forward for a second. I reach for his leg. He steps that back. As soon as I feel his leg go back, my hand comes back to his elbow. Here, back to his elbow, extend. I step to the outside. My head goes underneath. And if Tony's arm wasn't here, I should be able to see the camera, but Tony's arm is still down. All I'm going to do is drive off my foot and shoot my arm right through here. Back up to my toes, pop my head out, and then adjust and finish our cradle here. It's important that I'm driving through this when I'm attacking that leg. It's not, again, I'm not pulling his leg towards me. His feet are planted. He's going to have his weight should be pretty evenly distributed on his feet. So if Tony weighs 170 pounds, he's got 85 pounds on each of those legs. I'm not pulling 85 pounds of his weight off that leg. Instead, I'm going to drive him off balanced, knock him through his hip. Come this way a tiny bit. So here, I reach for the leg, it comes back. My hand immediately switches back here. If his arm's down, I'm not going to be able to get my head underneath, and it's going to make it hard for me as to get somebody with short arms. I'm not going to be able to reach that leg. So I need to create a window here so I can fit my head underneath, which makes me have the length I need to be able to reach that far leg. So pull it forward again. Here, extend. Now my head's underneath. Now I'm ready to drive off my toe to that cradle, pop my head out, look for the pin, see what shoulder's up, see what I have to do to finish there. Straight on. So here, he steps back, I extend the arm. Head comes in, ready to drive. Finish. And then one more time. Maybe here. Pull the head, he steps back. Notice I stepped out to the side. I completely changed the angle. Drive. Shoot that arm through. And I'm not pulling his leg towards me. I'm shooting my arm, almost like pointing my arm through, driving till they hit the mat, then locking up that cradle there. One last time. There. Again, here, he steps back, open this window, my head goes in, I step out to the side. I have to move my feet. If I don't move my feet from here, I'm not going to get this. If I don't move my head, I'm not going to get this. Here. And then finish our cradle from there. So that is, like I said, one I really like from there. I actually think that's easier to get than the near side. Some people might argue with me about that, but in my personal career, I know I was able to get that much easier. So that's just our low leg cradle from the front headlock. All right, sticking with the front headlock here and looking at cradle opportunities from this front headlock on our feet. So we already went over a near side cradle. We went over that low leg to the opposite side. For this one, we're going to use an inside trip. Inside trip is one of my favorite attacks to use or to do out of this front headlock on our feet. But if we keep the head trapped, there's an opportunity for us to get a cradle off of this. So we're going to go over that now. So everything's going to be the same here. We're going to do the same setup we used for our low leg, in a sense that I want to attack this leg with my leg on this inside trip. So I want this leg to be closer to me. To make that happen, I reach behind his leg, he steps back, and even if he doesn't really like shuffle step like that, all I have to do is kind of crunch them together as that leg goes, so come forward again. Step that one back a little, not the other one. So if he steps that back, as he steps back, I can kind of step in. I can take that ground as he's giving it to me. But the whole point is stand up straight for a second and just go like a square stance. I need to get my feet close, because what I'm going to do is come here and we're going to trip him. But basically his head's going to be trapped underneath that whole time. It's going to crunch him together in a very uncomfortable position when I'm keeping his head. And I'll show you quickly what would happen if I don't keep his head. So here he steps back, I step in, here he falls. Normally we let the head go, and now he's going to try to belly out, and we would just cover and get our takedown. But if I do this in order to get a pin, I'm going to keep this head and not let him belly out, and we'll have his leg trapped, and that's when we can adjust to our cradle. So slide this way a tiny bit. So I have my front headlock. He steps his leg back. I'm trying to keep his head trapped underneath my chest as best I can. It might come out to the side a little, but I'm trying to keep it trapped. Come leg back again. So as he steps back, I'm kind of doing like a shuffle step here. Bringing my feet close together here to this. Now from here, keeping his head down, trapped here. His leg is pinched. Tony, can you get out from here? Can you go anywhere?
Not really.
And his head's almost touching his knee. The problem is I'm between his legs right now. That's not bad for wrestling. Usually having the leg split's pretty good. But for me to get a cradle, it makes it difficult. So what I do is take my free hand, come under his leg, and lock my hands. It's a little bit of a reach here. But as soon as I get my hands locked now, and I have my hands locked near his leg, it's not necessarily ideal, but I can continue to drive now. Now, my body is helping me to keep my lock. So even though my lock is near his leg, he has to fight his leg through the rest of my body, which isn't going to happen. So I can kind of stay here, work up, and adjust for my pin. I don't usually like to try to pin circle to this way. I don't usually like to try to pin somebody in this position. It's kind of awkward, but at the same time, he's kind of stuck. You don't really have much either. So keep that leg trapped, adjust, just make sure I have a nice wide base here. Another option here, if I don't like that, I can bring myself to the outside. But if I do that, I want to make sure I try to shift my lock closer to his head. Either way works. The second way, just if I do step to the outside, there is a moment there where you could lose the cradle when you're in that transition. So you're better off keeping it the way that feels a little awkward. Unless for some reason you're unable to get your hands locked, but you should be able to. If I can get my hands locked, you should be able to get your hands locked there. So from this side, again, head's trapped. As his leg goes back, notice how I'm doing like a little hop step. Go ahead. So I'm kind of clicking my heels together because I got to get myself close. This is just a rule of thumb for the inside trip. If he steps back and I try to step from where I'm at, I'm off. Yeah, he's gonna run through me here. I need to go here and then go to the trip. So come this way a little bit here. There. Now notice I'm crunching him together over here. Lock my hands. Keep his leg trapped. Up on my toes. looking at his shoulders, get the pin. Let's go this way. So coming away from the wall a little bit here. He steps back. Got his head crunched down to the side here. This free hand is just coming underneath, locking, and then I'm keeping his leg elevated. And one last time. Pretty straight on. Here. He steps back. Crunch that down. Get my lock. Up on my toes. And finish my inside trip cradle there from the front headlock. So, a little awkward at first. Just because the way you land, locking your hands there. Practice it a few times. Once you get there, it's really tight. I mean, it's pretty tight for you on the bottom, right? But just getting used to that position from the front headlock, or the inside trip up the front headlock, keeping the head, keeping his leg trapped, crunch them down together, get your hands locked. As soon as your hands are locked, your knees switch, so that elevate his leg, and then we get up on our toes, we walk up and get the finish. Moving on now from the front headlock on our feet, we're going to move the front headlock down to either what would be considered kind of the quad pod position, where Tony's on all like hands and toes, or hands and knees from the front headlock position. This one works from either of those. The near side cradle that we already went over also works from those as well, but this one specifically would be very hard to get if Tony's hands aren't on the mat. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I don't think that you would want to go for it. We'd go for one of those options I already went over. So assuming that, let's just say Tony's down on his knees here, it just makes it easiest for teaching. We're going to do a roll through cradle here. So I could go, like we just sucked, I could go here and I could drive into him, knock him through his hip on our near side. But sometimes when I try to go for that, Tony will post his, the leg that's further away from you. If I'm here and I'm trying to drive him, he's not going to go anywhere here. He's got a support there. I'm not going to be able to pull him down because he's got a good base with his hands too. So I need to be able to take him somewhere else. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to take him straight back, or that way, the way that I'm looking. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have our front headlock. I'm going to stick my head underneath his chest. I'm going to grab the back of his leg like I'm trying to go for a bow and arrow cradle or a near side cradle. And instead of continue to drive through him at a different angle, I'm just going to continue moving straight through him the direction I'm looking right now. So what I mean by that, I'm going to still extend. Anytime I'm in the front headlock, I'm going to extend this arm because I'm trying to create a window for my head here. I have a big head, so I need to create a nice window here and get my head inside there. As I do that, keeping a hold of his chin, and I'm going to just, I guess, kind of hip heist or circle out to the side. My goal is to get to this leg, all right? So whenever I can get there, for me, I can't reach it from here, touching my head. All right, now I've got his leg here. I don't need to necessarily grab above his knee yet. I kind of like to lace. A lot of times I've found that when I get here, I'll tend to lace. But if you want to grab on around his knee, that's fine too. But the key from here, once I realize I can't drive him over because he's got that good base, I mean his foot's out over there, I need to recognize real quick that I'm not going to be able to just muscle him over towards the wall. So from here, I'm just going to kind of pause for a second. I'm going to take his head, the hand that's on his chin, is going to lift up, and we're going to actually bring him back over his own back. And it's, I don't really know how to explain it other than that. We're going to take him backwards. As we're rolling that backwards, I'm going to lock my hands and get the cradle. So here, hand comes under, I lock. I'm going to high leg over, and I'm going to pull his chin with me as I go. Here. As I go, I'm going to land on my back for a second, and then I'm going to high leg over with the other leg and continue coming through. Notice my head's on his chest right now. As I high leg with this second leg, my head's going to pop out, and we're going to be able to finish our cradles. So come here. Now my cradle's locked up. Now we can go back to finishing normal, or I could hook his leg like we were doing before. Come a little bit further this way. So again, I have his chin here. I extend the arm. I tuck my head under, but he's got a good support over there. So
here. You can't drive into them. Pulling up on the chin, high leg over. I'm gonna hit my back for a second. I stopped there a lot longer than I normally would because I was teaching it the last time. This time I'll go a little bit quicker. Here, head pops out. I'm up on my toes. Can finish this way, or can hook the leg and finish that way. There you go, at the camera for one. So, got my front headlock, extending, creating this window. Notice he's got a good support up. So when I come here, I can't drive through him. I need to recognize I could push here all day. It's not going to happen. High leg over with this leg. Land on my back for a second. Continue that motion. As I do, my head pops out. I don't want to stay on my knees here. Up on my toes. Have to adjust. Get the pin here. Or scoop and get the pin here. Either way. The key is recognizing what he's giving me. Again, I can't drive through him. Taking the easy way. So we're in a high leg. Continue to roll through. My head needs to pop out. It kind of happens naturally, but I've seen this when I've taught it to kids where they get stuck with their head on the middle, where they come here, and then they're kind of stuck here and they don't know what to do. One, if you pause here, it's hard to regain the momentum to keep going. But if I high leg, my head should come out. If I come in here, see my head already came out. Should automatically come out there. But if you're having trouble, try to not stop on your back there, even though when you're learning it, you might want to do it in steps, but when you do stop, that momentum, it gets hard to kind of get it going again there. So this is just, I call it a roll through, but a high leg cradle from the front headlock. All right, shifting gears a little bit here. Out of the front headlock, now we're going to go to an ankle pick setup for a cradle here. Being that I went to Penn State, was coached by Cale Sanderson. He does a lot of ankle picks, so that kind of filtered down towards me a little bit, where I've incorporated ankle picks into my the way I competed over the past 10 years. So we're going to use this setup. Again, I'm not going to do too much on the actual setup for the ankle pick. If you want to see that, you can check out some of my other videos. But one setup that I do like, and I'm going to briefly hit on it here, is I'm ankle picking Tony's right leg. To set this up, I'm a right foot lead wrestler in general. I'm going to come with a left-handed club. As I do that, what I use this club for is to kind of disguise the footwork, so he can't see how I'm moving my feet here. So when I club, I move my feet to set my ankle pick. Ankle pick is one of the only techniques on your feet where your lead foot should change. As a right-footed lead wrestler, almost all of my attacks are going to keep my right foot forward. In ankle pick, you switch your lead foot. So again here, when I club, I circle to the side, I switch my lead foot, I level change. So when I'm clubbing, it's also pulling him down. I'm not just hitting him, and you can't hit him anyway, but I'm not just hitting him moving to the side. I'm clubbing and pulling his head down, but as I'm pulling his head down, I'm moving my level down with him. I'm not actually using my arm to pull his head down. My arm's staying in the same place and my legs are bending. So it's here, and I lowered my level here. Now my back leg is going to be ready to drive. I switched my lead foot. Now from here, let's turn to the side a little bit because I want it to stay this way. So I ended up in a position like this. From here, my backhand, so for me, my right hand is going to come up and replace, and it's going to be kind of like another club here. The hand that was on the head is going to come down to the ankle. And then from here, to finish the ankle pick, I'm basically going to throw this arm. This hand is not pulling his leg towards me. I'm just kind of maintaining his leg. But when we hit the ground, I want to elevate that leg. And normally in an ankle pick, I would just throw his head here. It's going to be hard for me to get a cradle if I do that. So we're going to change it up a little bit, and we're going to keep his head. We're going to do everything the same on the setup. I'm going to elevate his foot still, but I'm not going to throw his head. We're going to keep it. So back to the quick setup here. I'm going to club with my outside hand, set my feet, club, set my feet, hand switches, drive to my ankle pick. I need to keep his head. Now when I'm holding his head here, it's important. I'm kind of using my forearm or my elbow, this whole part of my arm, kind of as like a little bit of a lever against his chest and his neck. I don't want this to be, for you guys to see, I don't want this resting like this.
I want it more kind of here where I can get a little bit of leverage off of it. The whole point of that is going to be to keep his chin and his head, kind of keeping his chin down against his chest here. So here, when I drive, I'm keeping his head and I'm going to close the gap on him. I'm going to follow up with him here, and I'm going to elevate his leg on my leg here, keeping his head right to here. Now, this is what I was talking about. Notice how my elbow is still in his chest. This is what's giving me this lever here. If my arm is out, he can get his head back, all right? I'm not gonna be able to get a cradle if his head goes back, so I need to keep this. From here, I'm just gonna switch my hands again. My free hand is gonna come up over his head, and my leg that's elevating his is gonna step up towards his head. Here, now we have this locked up. Now he's in trouble. Get up on our toes, finish. The hardest part of this, in my opinion, is keeping his head nice and tight as we're falling down there, especially if you're like a little bit sweaty and your grip's starting to go towards the end of the match. It's definitely possible. You know, I don't have the best grip. I don't have long forearms or long limbs here where I can kind of get more torque. So if I can do it, I think you guys can do it too. But again, my setup here, left hand club. As I'm clubbing, my feet are setting. My hands switch, come into the ankle. I'm driving through him, and I'm closing the gap. I'm not doing this and just staying put. All right? As he's falling down, I'm taking that ground, elevating this foot onto my leg, keeping his head tight. Here. Stepping up, staying nice and high here. I'm keeping his head high because as I make this transition where I bring my arm over his head, it's going to be a lot easier. Again, if his head falls down and I'm chasing this, I'm not going to be able to get that. I'm a good guy. He's going to be starting to belly up, fight his arm. This arm's going to come through. There. And then just keep going that way. Yeah, that's going to happen. So, come back this way. So, if I'm here and I have this elevated, I'm keeping his head up high. This hand comes over, nice and tight. Lock my hands. Now I can get up on my toes. And that gets pretty tight pretty quick, right? Yeah. We'll go back that way again. So, setting it up, club, switch, level change, ankle pick, drive, keep the head, leg steps up, keeping that head high, hand comes over, lock, tripod up, and get your pin. Really great way to get a pin there. Ankle picks are great. A lot of people settle for their 2 points, but if you can keep that head trapped, it's a great way to get your takedown and backs. And really, if you get that cradle lock, you should get a pin every time. All right, so we did our cradle off of a traditional ankle pick where I'm attacking Tony's lead leg, his dominant leg. Now, another ankle pick, so for me personally, wrestling, for the longest time, I was hitting just that ankle pick to that side. Guys started to get wise to it, so when I would do my setup, I would come here, I'd reach, and that leg would go back. So one thing I started to do was anticipate that and start attacking the opposite leg for my ankle pick. And the way I would do that, so just come back and I'd do the here, he stepped that back, I'd come here, and instead of driving straight through, I pull this way, and we elevate here for an ankle pick to the opposite side. Now, doing that also lends itself to the opportunity for a cradle there as well. I would say it's not quite as easy to fall into as the traditional ankle pick, but there is an opportunity for it there. And our whole goal of this video is just to show you all the different ways that we can get to a cradle. Specifically, again, late in the match, you need a pin. You're down by 5, 6, whatever it is. A takedown's not going to do it, and you need to get a pin. This is going to help us to do that. So, again, for the setup on this, it's the exact same setup we use in our traditional ankle pick. It's just when I start to reach for that leg, I know it's going to disappear. My hand's just going to simply continue on the motion it was going, and it's going to attack the opposite leg. So, club, adjust my feet, hand switch. I went for that ankle, it's not there. Come in here, and once I realize I'm not getting that ankle, because if I did get that ankle, I'm going to drive straight through him. If I don't get that ankle, now I have to adjust, turn to your side, the other way. Now, I'm going to, instead of driving this way, I'm actually going to pull his head towards the camera. So you do have to recognize the direction change once you lose that initial ankle pick, because I wanted to go here,
but now he pulled that away. Now I have to go basically a 90-degree angle in the opposite direction. So come back again. So here, steps back. All right, I got this. Now, sorry, my arms are cheap. Keeping a tight grip on his head. I'm not pulling, same as on the traditional ankle pick, I'm not pulling his foot off the ground. That's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how strong I am, his foot's glued to the ground. Instead, we're going to use that as a pivot point. I'm just kind of holding his foot in place as we pull his body to the ground, top part of his body. Now, from here, a couple different things we can do as far as locking up a cradle. It depends on what you want to adjust. So from here, it also depends on what Tony does. If Tony tries to sit up, I'm going to shoot to the far side. That's easy because my hand's already over the top of his head. If Tony wants to stay down, I'm going to have to switch my hand and come to the near side leg. Neither of them's right or wrong. It just kind of depends on what he's given us. Again, I don't want to chase down the far side if he's giving me the near side. So we have to know what's there. So let's say I did my whole setup. He steps back, coming inside. Again, I'm just pulling his head then, holding his ankle in place. Slide this way a tiny bit, hit the wall. Here, elevate, stepping this leg up. Again, from here, if Tony tries to turn away from me, I'll go and shoot this arm through to our far side cradle. If I have this elevated and Tony turns into me, my hand has to switch to my arm facing down, and then this one's nice and easy because he has his leg elevated. Same thing, I just lock my hands, my 10-finger grip, up on my toes. I can finish here. So it's a personal preference. Well, somewhat a personal preference. I would say, again, whichever way he's going, don't get so stubborn that you won't go for the cradle that he's giving you, but do know that you can go either side on this. So let's say I already faked for this. Here, my knee hits when I'm driving through on my ankle pick, pulling him to the side, and my knees switch. Once I hit the mat, this knee goes down, this one goes up, because this is the one I'm going to elevate his leg on. Here, and I'm stepping in to rotate a little bit further. Here, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, so when we fell, my hand was like this on the back of his head. If he continues to turn into me, my hand has to go from this grip to this grip, so now that I can lock my near side. If he stays that way and tries to turn away from me, I have to shoot, like right now he's creating distance. Most likely he's going to try to turn that way since this leg's elevated. As he does that, I need to shoot across and lock up this far side cradle. And then again, you can go knee in the side, you can hook with the leg. All those options for finishing that we showed earlier. But the key is recognizing what he's giving you. So just another option off this ankle pick, we can attack the near ankle pick and do our cradle from there. If he takes that away from us, we have a near side and a far side cradle off this far leg ankle pick. Continuing on here with our cradles and different ways to get into it. Another one that is very common, and it's not necessarily off of one specific move, but it's when we're turning our takedown into a Turk. Coaches are always telling guys to look, at least the coaches I've always dealt with, you don't want to just get your 2 points. You want to get your 2 plus. I want to get my 2 and my 2 backs, my 2 and my 3 backs in college, 2 and your 4 backs. And so one really common way to do that is to get in on your takedown, lift, typically your double or your high crotch, and lift and Turk. And you get in a position where you can cross-face your opponent, end up getting some back points there, maybe even a pin. Zane Rutherford is really good in there. Some of the other Penn State guys, very, very good in that position. But if you're not as good in that position as them, like I am not, you can look for a cradle there. So for me, I'm a big high crotch guy. I've always shot high crotch, so I'm not much of a double. I will switch off to my double. But on a Turk, so I'll just go turn and butt to them. However I want to set up my high crotch, doesn't matter. I'm just going to say I got to my shot here, and I'm adjusting to finish this shot. Now, I'm not going to lift Tony way up in the air because this floor is very hard and it's not very forgiving, and Tony and I are old. So what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to drive across, and when I'm stepping in for my Turk, I'm going to lift his near leg up. I'm going to step my leg in, and I'm going to try to hook this leg, his far leg, above his knee. And that's what's going to be called a Turk for anybody that might not know that. So I'm driving up here. I switch off to my double. I start to drive. And if I was doing this live, I'd be trying to pick him up. But I'll lift this leg. I'm going to step in and hook. Now my goal is to get my knees as high up in his crotch as possible. Go ahead and belly out. His goal is going to be trying to belly out. If he gets his knee, I'll come back. Here. Go ahead, now go flat. Just let me get it to work here. So if he gets his knee through past my leg here, he should be able to get out. What I mean by that is my Turk is below his knee. Go ahead and like wrestle from here. He can get his leg through. I just lost everything that I had with that. So for me, the higher I am in the crotch with this, the better, because now he can't get this leg through. My leg is above his knee. This is where I can go to work from. Now from here, what I was mentioning before with some of the Penn State guys, and a lot of good wrestlers do this, I'm just partial to Penn State, is that they'll come across the head. There's different strategies for how to do this to make it painful, but in general, they're coming here, they're elevating, and they're getting back points here. And again, some guys can get pins from here. I was never great there, but one thing I can do, instead of pushing them this way, is we can come over the head, and what we can do, to make this work a little bit more, if he's trying to fight me, turn this way a tiny bit, there, is instead of just trying to bring his head down, I'm going to bring it up first and then in. I know from a jiu-jitsu standpoint, I know John Danaher and Gordon Ryan always talk about spinal misalignment, and it makes it a lot easier to do things on your opponent once their spine's misaligned. Very common here too, or very same thing here. If I misalign his spine, Tony's much more likely to do what I want him to do. If I keep his spine in a line here, he's a little bit stronger, he's going to be able to fight a little bit more. So if I'm trying to lock up this cradle, one thing I can do, if I'm trying to fight his head straight down, he's fighting it straight back, we could be in a battle here. I might win this, I might not. But if I can get his head turning to the side, like this, I'm going to be able to move him around a lot easier and pull his head down. He's a lot weaker as soon as I do that. So I start pulling his head in, again, trying my best to misalign his spine here. If I can't, it's not the end of the world, it just makes it easier. I have his leg trapped with my Turk, and all I'm going to do is bring everything together here, settle back so I have room to get my arm through, punch that in, lock my 10-finger grip up. I can let his leg out then, walk my hands or my feet up, tripod, and get my pin. So, kind of at an angle here. I shoot my high crotch. I'm in a good position. I start to drive across. As I'm doing that, I lift the leg, step in, Turk. All right, above his knee. Got some guys are coming here. I could try to fight here. Maybe he'll fight into me. Come across over his head. If I can lift his head up, right? Tony, that's not comfortable when I do that. Yeah. Start pulling this way. I don't want to pull him straight up into me. I'm just kind of trying to show you guys. Sit up here. Pulling his head this way, as opposed to just this way. I'm a little bit stronger, so go back down kind of. I'm going to keep pulling him this way. I don't want to pull him all the way up into a sit position, but I'm going to adjust my inside knee so I have room to get this arm through. And then when I can get my hands locked, I can let his leg out. And right now, if you remember from before, my shoulder's a little bit high, so there's a couple options I can do. I'm going to sprawl back to readjust and then get the pin here. So this is a very, very common technique, going from a takedown to a Turk. A lot of people just look for the tilt, but if you can, anytime you can lock up a cradle, you can end the match. So being able to recognize that, hey, maybe I can't get that cross face to get my back points there. The reason might be because he's fighting into you. If he's fighting into you, again, take what he's giving you. Over the head, crunch his head in. If I can get his ear onto his shoulder, it's going to be a lot weaker. It's going to be a lot easier to lock up. If you can't get it, you might have to work a little bit harder, but it's still available for you. But always be looking for your cradles off of your Turk and your takedown. Turn your 2 points into a pin, or at least 2 points in back points. Another situation where we can get our cradle is from our 2-on-1, or a Russian tie, whatever you want to call it. We already went over the Navy ride or the arm Turk from when we were on the mat. We can also get to that from our 2-on-1. It's one of my favorite ways to get a takedown, actually, because I can usually get back points off it, but we can also get to our cradle. So I get my 2-on-1. And yeah, I have a whole video on the 2-on-1, so I'm not going to go over this too much in depth. But essentially, if Tony's inside leg is close to me, I'm going to step behind his leg. I'm going to keep my top hand tight. My other hand's going to go behind his knee. We're going to pull him back to this position. And most of the time, I'm keeping his leg elevated. I'm keeping this. And we're just holding tight here to get our back points while he fights. And then we eventually let him down to his stomach after we got our takedown in our backs. But as we mentioned earlier, when we were going off of Tony's stand-up, we can also turn this into a couple different cradles depending on the look that he's giving us there. So yeah, let's go that way. So I get my 2-on-1. I'm stepping behind his knee so he can't get this back. If I don't step behind it and I try to reach, he's going to step that leg way back and I'm going to lose everything. So I need to get my leg behind his leg to block it so he can't step it out of the way. So I step behind, I level change, I keep this top hand nice and tight, my other hand comes behind his knee, I'm pulling back with this, I'm using my head, everything's kind of, we're driving through him, but I'm pulling back with my arms. So my leg is driving through, my arm and my head are pulling back this way, and my knee's blocking here. Now as soon as we hit, my back knee comes up to elevate. Anytime we can elevate a leg, it's a good thing. Now, as we mentioned before, for a few different situations, if I'm elevating his near leg, more often than not, he's not going to try to turn into me because it's hard for him to come this way. He wants to get away. He wants to get that leg out that way. He might try to turn in. If he can get this leg all the way through, he will. But if I'm keeping my head and chest down, he's not going to have the option to come that way. So just slide this way. So the way we landed, actually, a little bit further. Here. The way we landed, I had my hand underneath, calling this an arm Turk or a Navy ride, and my other hand was in the armpit in a 2-on-1. So we landed like this. From here, if he starts to turn away from me, I'm going to follow him, and we're going to lock up our cradle here. I need to follow his head. I'm following which way his head goes. If I see his head starting to turn that way, I'm going to take him that way. It's nice and easy to do that. If he's trying to turn into me here, I'm going to follow his head this way. The major difference is I need to recognize which way my hand has to grip. So I landed here. I think it's easier to get the cradle on the far side because all my arm has to do is come like this. Very easy to create that momentum. There is a little bit bigger of a shift I have to make if he turns into me because my hand has to come up and over and I have to cover a little bit more ground. But if I lock this up, I think it's more secure. So the benefit of if he turns into me is I think the cradle's tighter since I have the near leg elevated. I think I can pin him a little bit easier. If he turns away, I think it's an easier cradle to get locked, but it's harder to pin him because it isn't as tight. So I kind of pick your poison, but also he's kind of the one deciding too. Or I could kind of set him up. If he's turning into me, I could kind of just come here and make him fight back the other way. And we could kind of bait him into this side. So not that you can't pin him with the far side. It's just, I think it's a little bit looser than the near side. And so again, kind of pick your poison there. They're both very effective. The key is recognizing that off of this Navy ride. And again, this is kind of review because we went over it from the top position, but just to recognize that we can do this from the 2-on-1 on our feet. So I get my 2-on-1, I step behind, hand behind here, top hand's pulling back, my outside leg is driving forward, I'm blocking with the knee and I'm using my head here, immediately stepping up, elevating his leg here. And then again, if he turns away, being ready to lock this cradle. And if he turns in, hand comes over the top, we lock that cradle. And we finished those 100 times already. But just recognizing again, 2 different options off of here. Don't be stubborn. Don't try to force the near side if he's turning away from you. Take what he's giving you and then work for your fall. This is just a couple more ways to do your cradle off of the 2-on-1 and the Navy ride. All right, so the next position we're going to work on to get our cradle from is the single leg. I'll say that this one's a little bit more unorthodox, and I don't want to say harder to get, but you don't see it quite as often. It's more of a fun move. It's what we call like a camp move that just the kids have fun doing it. But it does work. I've seen it work at higher levels. You just don't see it quite as often. And this is going to be, if I hit a single leg and head inside single on Tony, drove up to my feet, did everything right, and I got to here, and bringing him down for a 2-point takedown just isn't going to be enough for me. So if this is the case and I need to get more points, I need to find a way to take him down immediately to his back. And the way we're going to do that, since this video is about cradles, we're going to cradle him from here. Now, let me say, if Tony's not super flexible, let's start with that. If I was really tall and I was trying to do this move to Tony, he would probably fall down if I did this, but since we're the same height, it's not going to be a problem. But essentially what I need to do is I need to get his leg higher. So I'm going to punch underneath. I'm going to punch my other arm underneath. All right, and the way I'm doing that, I can finish, they call it like a treetop finish. I could do a normal finish here, or which would be him, again, if I was really tall and then Tony's leg went way up here when I brought it up to my shoulders, he'd fall down. But again, since we're similar height, I can do this. But it's key that I get my shoulder underneath when I do this little punch. If I just try to punch here and lift, his leg is going to fight basically my bicep. He's going to win that here. But if I level change, it's important I don't get lazy here. I level change to the point now he's got my shoulders, my hips, everything under here. If he fights his leg down now, he's fighting through my whole body. So now from here, I do another uppercut. I come with my other hand, or my other shoulder. Now from here, I don't know if you guys can see it yet basically, but here's my cradle. All right? So from this position, I'm starting to slide down on it a little bit. The closer I am to his knee, the easier it's going to get this cradle. The closer I am to his knee, the harder it's going to get his leg up here. So you got to give a little to get a little. I end up down close to his foot with this this treetop, I guess we'll call it. And I'm essentially just going to attack his head here with both of my hands. I'm going to lock, and we're just going to drive through him to the mat. So it's hard to do slow. So legs up high, just jump to my cradle. And then from here, bring him to the mat, and then we readjust our lock. All right, kind of hard to do it slow. Kind of painful, it didn't need me in the throat. So I got my single leg, and then from here again, the closer I can get to his knee, the better my lock's gonna be, but the stronger his leg's gonna be and the harder it is for me to get his leg high. So I have to kind of give a little to get a little. So shoulder low, other shoulder low, and I'm nice and low here. I'm jumping and locking my hands behind his neck. And I can kind of pull his head in. I like to continue to kind of drive through because I want him to land on his back. And then once we get to here, we have our near side cradle. We can finish that the way we've been finishing it the whole day, up on our toes or knee on the side there. So, so like I said, also on that, go back to this side. So once I get this knee up, again, I can't come here against a good guy. If I start trying to do this and lifting his leg up on my shoulder, I'm never going to get it there. So I have to be diligent. Shoulder, shoulder, lock my hands. And I like to drive through. I don't like to pull people onto me, but we can pull his head to his knee, and I can kind of work in. I just don't like to take too much time there. But if you get that locked, anytime you bring his head closer to his knee, it's very hard for him to keep his balance. But if I'm pulling him into me, it's easier for him to hop forward than it is for him to hop backwards. I'd rather have him hop backwards, also because as he's hopping backwards, that means he's going to fall towards his back. If I'm bringing him towards me, there's a chance that he doesn't fall on his back. He's not going to land on me, but could create a scramble that I don't really want to be in. So why risk it? Easier for me to walk forward, but and to make him walk backwards. So one last time, I get my single. Again, if you watch my single leg video, I go over finishing this a lot more in depth. But today, we're not really talking about just the single leg. We're talking about how to set up our cradles. So here, behind the head. Hands locked, again, 10-finger lock right on the back of his neck. If I can pull his head to his knee, fine, but what I don't want is this. I don't want to pull him this way. We're going to drive in. I can pull his head in, but I'm walking my feet forward. And then notice how I kind of land here with his knee or shin kind of in my throat. We just need to adjust a little bit to get this a little bit tighter. And then again, I can go knee on the side. I could hook that far leg, or I could just stay kind of chest on chest. There's kind of a preference there. But in general, like I said, this one's more of kind of a fun one for kids to do at camp. It does work, and I just wanted to show it because I know that it is an option from here. But yeah, that's our cradle from a single leg. Okay, so now we're going to go into our cradle off of the Iranian lift. The Iranian lift is one of my favorite ways to finish a high crotch. I had a lot of success with it, but if you've ever watched me wrestle, you probably know that I didn't pin many people off of it. It's because I usually was content to take my 2 points. But it's good to know that there is a situation here, depending on the reaction that our opponent gives us, that we could end up in a situation where we can get to a cradle from here. So Iranian lift, again, I'm not digging into all these setups in too much detail, but you do need to know them if you're going to get to the cradle from these positions. So I hit my high crotch. Iranian lift happens when Tony sprawls back on me. I'm in an extended position here. I'm going to take my outside hand and my opposite side foot. I'm going to post this hand, this foot. I'm going to keep my other hand on the knee. I'm going to get my hips underneath me, basically doing a knee slide. Here. So I get his hands on the mat, I get his feet in the air. Now from here, normally what I did when I wrestled, because I just like getting takedowns because I wasn't very good at scoring back points all the time, is I would come out the back door, here, cover, and get my 2 points. But let's say I needed a little bit more than that. Here. Let's say I need a little bit more, or let's say sometimes guys got smart to this and they would scissor their legs here. If he does that, I can't come out the back door. There's no room for me to do that. But I need to recognize in this position I can do something else. What I can do is I'm going to shrug my shoulders, I'm going to put my chin to my chest, and I'm going to shake him off, and so he'll fall right in front of me here, and it's going to lock or open up a low leg cradle for me. So here, he's holding on tight, he's locking up his legs. I drop him right in front of me. My hand's already in place for the low leg. Just jump right over the head, lock my 10-finger grip, come out, and finish. Now, depending on how tightly he's scissoring his legs, or I guess you can't figure 4 there, or I guess you could, it's just the arm. Depending on how tight he's holding on, you might have to shake a little bit more. Some guys will fall off a lot easier. But the key is when I'm in this position here, as my chin goes down, I'm shrugging my shoulders, and I'm basically just trying to put my head down into the mat, or looking down into the mat, which is commonly not something you want to do in wrestling. But in this situation, that's what we want to do here. So I get him high in the air here. He's scissoring it, so if I can't come out the back here. I'm kind of stuck. So I'll keep a hold of the leg. Chin goes down, shoulders come up near my ears, and I start to shake until he falls off. As soon as I feel him starting to slide down the back of my head, I need to be ready to pounce on this. 10-finger grip, and we can work over for our pin. Now, one other thing that can happen here too, and I would say this happens at the younger level, is sometimes guys don't know how to float their hips on top. So even if he's not scissoring his legs, sometimes when I try to come out the back to get the takedown like I did at first, sometimes they'll just kind of flop their leg over if they don't know what they're doing, or if they don't know how to properly float their hips. We can do the same thing from there. So just be aware that if you're trying to get your 2 points, sometimes somebody will put you in a position you can get your pin. So here, pop him up. Sometimes as I'm trying to come out the back, he just kind of falls off. As soon as I feel that leg coming off, I know I can get my cradle. So it's time to give up on the 2 points and commit to the cradle when that happens. So, and that just happens, again, if somebody doesn't know how to keep their hips pointed down towards the mat. Again, usually at the less experienced level. Occasionally you'll see it with guys that are a little bit more experienced, if they're just kind of off balance. Let's turn this way. But just keep in mind, you don't have to sit there and wait for him to scissor his legs for you to do this. So again, pop him up. Here, he's got his legs scissored. Shrug my shoulders. I'm trying to bring him up on my shoulder blades. Shake. He falls off. Cover. Same thing, but if he just doesn't float his hips well. Here, I try to come up the back. Yeah, he falls off. Again, try to get the back of my elbow on the back of his neck, crunch everything up, and work to get our pin from there. So this Iranian lift is a really good position because it's a way to get takedowns off of what is perceived to be a failed shot. I get in on my high crotch, I'm extended, I'm not in great shape, and then I'm able to post, get my hips underneath me. If I can come out the back and get my 2, normally that's what I would do, but this is a video about cradles. So he scissors his legs, chin to my chest, shoulders up towards my ears, shake him off, keep his leg high, attack the head, lock up your cradle, and finish it. Same thing if he doesn't scissor his legs, but he also, if his hips just happen to fall off, we can do the same thing. Again, that's probably going to be a guy that's less experienced. The more experienced guy is going to be scissoring his legs. You're going to have to work a little bit harder for it. But either way, we end up in a low leg cradle. I'm going to move back down to the mat again, but from a neutral position on the mat. And by that, I mean we're going to go to the crackdown position. I spent a ton of time in my career, mostly in high school and college. In freestyle, you don't want to spend so much time in the crackdown just because of exposure. You can get there. It happens a lot. You just have to be a lot more cautious. But we're going to look at this from, I shot my high crotch on here. This is the crackdown position. For me, when I get to the crackdown, you can check out my high crotch video for a lot more details on this. But crackdown position, a couple keys that I try to look at have nothing to do with the cradle. I want to get my inside hip down to the mat. My inside hand usually is attached to his leg still. I'm keeping my shoulder inside his hip and my outside hand posts here. The reason I do these things is if my butt gets too high, he can roll me right through the wall. If my shoulder comes out, he can scoot his butt and get the corner. So that's why I have my shoulder in. And if I'm so committed to holding on to his leg with this hand, which a lot of people do, I don't need to hold on to his leg with this hand. I instead need to post here. But if I'm like this, he can hit me over that direction. Other way. Hit me to the side. I don't have a support, and then he can sprawl his leg back, and I lose it. So those are just some keys to the crackdown in general. I want my inside hip down. I want my outside hand posted, and I want my shoulder inside his hip. That's just in general. Again, not really much to do with the cradle itself, but good to know. So I shot my high crotch. I'm in here. And again, everything we've been saying so far today, maybe I need more than a takedown. Maybe I need more than a takedown, just back points. So let's look for an opportunity to get to our cradle. Now, turn to your side. A lot of times, Tony, what's going to happen is what Tony's doing here. He's going to lock his hands around my waist. This can make things somewhat difficult for me. His goal is going to be trying to get me out of the position. All those things I just said. He wants my butt to be high. He wants me to have my shoulder out. He wants to be able to get me into the outside there so he can recover his position. So for me right here, what I want to do is elevate his leg. Now, easier said than done, because if I take away my post and bring it here, there's opportunity for him to kind of bring me back to that direction. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to sink my bottom knee under his leg. So I'll bring my hand back briefly if I have to. If I can grab his toe or his foot, it's actually easier. I just want to lift it up enough that I can get my knee underneath. All right, I'm still keeping my head and chest down here. I'm never pointing my hips straight towards the ceiling, maybe for a brief second when I'm going to commit to the actual cradle. But my goal is this hand, if you remember when we were doing the cradles from a leg in and also from the crab ride position, we were getting this arm underneath. This arm's already here because it was my shooting hand for my high crotch. So I already have this all set, but I need to start elevating his leg to kind of help me here. And then from here, I'm going to take my free hand, the one that was posted, and we're going to hunt for his head. As I do that, this hand's going to come up. Even if he still had that hand locked a little bit, it's going to be difficult if he's got a really, really tight grip. But if I can get this leg elevated and start to put him into danger, he's going to let go of that lock, and we're going to be in position. Is your head like against the wall here? So where I'm going to be able to high leg out now, keeping his leg high, and we're going to rotate ourselves up to this cradle on this side. Again, easier said than done, but it is an opportunity for us to get to our cradle here. So, kind of a little sloppy on that. Let's come back here. Again, I got in on my high crotch. I'm trying to elevate his leg here. Now, as I start to drive up and get height, put him into danger. If he starts to roll to his side there, that's okay too. Coming back and looking for his head. I want to be in this position. I could even potentially kick straight over the top. For me, I don't necessarily feel like I need to do that. I'm just going to continue to run my feet in a circle, lock it up, and then tripod and finish. Very similar position to where we were at, like I said before, from the crab ride and also from a leg in defense. So again, sinking down low here. I like I said, I like to elevate this. Some people in this position in general, trying to elevate here. I can't get a cradle from this position, but I can expose his back. This is what a lot of people are usually trying to do. They're trying to elevate with this leg. We're going to elevate with the inside leg to kind of give myself a little bit more range of motion with this arm. The more I'm down here, this is good positioning for holding position. But if I'm going to go for this cradle, I do have to open my head and chest up to reach back and attack this head. And if he's going to keep his arms in the way, I'm going to have to put him in danger and start driving him back this way. When he adjusts, if his hands come unlocked, that's when I need to commit. And again, high legging over, tripoding up here. Not always the easiest position to get this from, but it is another option that we do need to be aware of because, like I said, this whole video is focusing on cradles. So keep in mind, if I hit this, the best time to get the cradle is immediately after I get to the crackdown before he gets to established position. If he's holding on really tight, go ahead and get a crackdown on me. If he's really tight like this here, it's going to be really hard for me to get the cradle. So if I let him kind of tighten up and ball up here in the position that I'm now in, it's going to be hard to do it. The quicker that I can get to that off of my shot, here I shoot, crack down. The quicker I can make that transition, the better. The more I let him settle in and look to get a stalemate, it's going to be a lot harder, especially if he's good defensively in the crackdown. So just another option here, knowing that once we hit our crackdown, quicker is better on this one. A lot of these times it can be, we can kind of set up the cradle once we get there. For this one, it's going to be a little bit quicker because we give a good guy time to get set there. We're going to get stuck in that position. Ref's going to stalemate it. We're going to have to come back up to our feet. So this is just a cradle from the crackdown. All right, so we got one more cradle from our offense on our feet here. We went over one from a single leg, and it was kind of a little bit more gimmicky. But it does work. But this one that we're going to go over now, shelving the single leg is much more common. I've seen it a lot in freestyle. I've seen it a lot in folk style too. So essentially, shoot our single leg. Better wrestler is going to sprawl. I'm just going to seatbelt for a second so I can actually talk. So we get into this position where Tony has a whizzer. I have my single leg. A lot of times what happens is I'm here. He's trying to keep weight onto me here, and you can end up a bunch of different ways we can try to finish, a bunch of different ways he can try to defend from here. But my goal, one of the ways I can finish here is to shelf his leg. And what I mean by that would be, I can let go of the whizzer for a second, would be to bring his leg up and for me to put it on my leg, calling this a shelf. I'm trying to get to this position. Now, easier said than done to get to here, but it is a very good way to finish. We just need to go through the steps and make sure we get there. Slide up a little bit. So I got to my shot, my head's underneath. The first thing I need to do if I'm in this position and I'm stuck, I need to get my head out. For me to lift his leg, doesn't matter how strong I am, if my head's stuck underneath him, it's going to be really, really hard for me to do that. So first thing I like to do in this position is I'm looking for his head, and I'm going to push his head away. Even though I can't see it, I'm going to find his head, I'm going to push it away. I'm going to bring my head to the ball of his shoulder on his whizzer arm here, to here. Now I have a lot better leverage. Now I have a lot more strength. It's good. Anytime my head's up, that's usually a good thing in wrestling. I also just lengthened his whizzer here, which makes it lose a little bit of the power that he had from it. From here, I'm going to take my inside knee, and I'm going to use it as a ramp. And what I mean by a ramp is like kind of, notice how it's kind of at an angle here. I'm going to slide his shin up my leg. I'm going to use that as opposed to having to just lift his leg. I'm going to take away a little bit extra of the weight that I have to lift by using my leg to kind of reinforce that. So Tony still has his whizzer. The one thing I like to do, once again I got my head to a better position, I'm going to bring my free hand to the front of his knee. My other hand's going to come down by his shoelaces. From here, I'm going to use both of these hands to pull this leg up. Here. From here, now I can sink my back arm deep and I can now switch my knees to here. As I'm doing this, notice I just now moved my hand towards his head because sometimes guys will try to dive, in folk style, guys might try to dive through the middle. If they do that, that's going to give us the cradle super easy. Other times they might just turn in and try to face us. As I'm up, stay down though. He might try to turn in and face me here to maybe try to fight to get out of this position here. As soon as his head starts to turn to me, because if he's still committed to his whizzer, for him to stay glued to me, his body still has to be facing me here. If he lets go of his whizzer, he can turn and kick that way. That's completely different. Some guys are going to stay here, and sometimes they stay here too long. You'll see a lot of times where guys get here and they'll kind of reach here, and the guy will bail for a second, and he'll come back, and it's just kind of gets into a little bit of a battle here. But if I'm going to go for this cradle, I need to commit to it. So my goal, I've said it a couple times, get the inside of my elbow on the back of his neck. And so I can't do this all lackadaisically, kind of slowly reach over. We have to jump to it to attack it when I know that I want the cradle. So I could be here because I don't want him to try to roll underneath, or at least I don't want him to think I do. Here, and then when I'm ready to go, I'm stepping in, coming over his head. Locking up my grip, and then just like we've done, drive to it, and finish our cradle there. Now, I'll do one more time getting to the actual shelf position because this is really important to be able to get to here. Not from a cradle perspective, just from wrestling in general. From here, I need to get my head to the outside, find his head, bring my head to the ball of his shoulder, adjust my hands here, use my leg like a ramp here, go back to blocking his head, other arm comes up, knees switch, now I have my shelf. Now from here, I can keep coming up, and Tony, stay down though for now. What happens sometimes is guys will get here, and if a folk style match, Tony might try to dive through my legs. And yeah, roll. Yes. If I'm not ready, it could get into a scramble where I could get in trouble. But if I am ready, I could turn it into a cradle. So if I start to come up too high, this is where guys get in trouble. They stand up too high here. That's when, don't actually do it. That's when Tony would be ready to roll. Anytime I feel that his hips are sinking, I need to crash my hips to the mat too. So if I'm here and Tony starts to roll, I gotta sink down too. And if you time it right, you should cradle him every time. But it's one of those things, if you're not aware of it and he gets the jump on you, you're gonna end up in a scramble. Now again, freestyle, you don't have to worry about this because he's not gonna roll across his back. But in freestyle, guys will fight into you and control the hands like I showed first. But do know in folk style, if you have a guy who likes to roll around a lot, when you're coming up with a single, if you stand up too high, he's probably gonna roll. You just need to be ready. When his arm goes, you need to crash your hips to the ground and get your arm ready to lock up a cradle. But just again here, shelf the leg. Here, I might be up on both of my feet, might be on a knee. Again, if he's keeping this whizzer, his goal is to earn back his whizzer and get me back down to here. To do that, he needs to keep this pretty tight. And to keep that tight, he has to have his head and chest kind of facing me, which allows me to get the cradle. So if I have this here and he's trying to regain his position, that's when I can step up, jump to this cradle, and then we can finish. So, really, really important position. Again, if you want to learn how to finish there better, just from a single leg standpoint, check out one of my other videos on that. But looking for the cradle, just know that it is an option there. We need to be aware of guys in folk style specifically that are going to dive underneath. But when we're elevating that leg, if he is going to try to defend and keep his whizzer, his head and chest are going to be facing you. When we're ready to go to that cradle, you got to punch that arm over, step your leg to it, get those hands locked, continue to drive through them, and finish that cradle.